NBA trade deadline live updates. Latest on De'Aaron Fox and Jimmy Butler. Clippers deal PG Tucker. Fox is the new name on the market after sending signals he doesn't want to commit long-term to the Kings. Meanwhile, Butler remains suspended as the Heat decide his future. The LA Clippers plan to keep Patty Mills as of now, per a league source, but that is to be determined. The trade deadline is Thursday and the buyout market is TBD. Mills is 36 years old and on a minimum deal. P. Tucker trade gets Clippers under luxury tax. The LA Clippers become the first of the 14 teams over the luxury tax line to get themselves under, shedding $6 million from their cap sheet in today's trade of PJ Tucker and Mo Bamba for Patty Mills and Drew Eubanks. The Clippers are also sending their 2030 second-round pick to the Jazz, a league source told The Athletic. Utah already had swap rights on the pick, but they now have full ownership of 2 second-rounders in 2030. It appears the Clippers will also generate 2 small trade exceptions worth $6.5 million and $2.1 million. Eubanks has a non-guaranteed deal for $4.75 million if the Clippers want to keep him around as the backup center next year. With no guarantee date, they can also keep him around as a potential salary match piece until opening day. Tucker and Bamba will be names to watch in the buyout market as they don't figure to be in the Jazz's plans. Clippers trade PG Tucker to Jazz in money-saving move. Source: the LA Clippers have agreed to a trade with the Utah Jazz again, a team source confirms to The Athletic. The Clippers will get former Spurs Drew Eubanks and Patty Mills from Utah. PG Tucker, Mo Bamba, and a 2030 second-round pick will go to Utah. The move saves the Clippers money. ESPN was first to report the news. De'Aaron Fox in the know, one player to watch before the deadline. Fox is the clear jewel of the trade deadline class now that it is clear the Kings will listen to offers for him. He has 1.5 years left on his deal, and word around the NBA is that the San Antonio Spurs are the team at the top of his wish list. That's good news for the Kings. Whereas Jimmy Butler has struggled in his attempts to get to the Phoenix Suns due to collective bargaining agreement restrictions and a dearth of assets, the Spurs have a flexible cap sheet and a wealth of draft picks and young players. Few teams league-wide can top the Spurs' potential trade package. Still, don't be surprised to see other teams try to get in the mix, with the Heat themselves looming as an intriguing fit due to the location, lack of state income tax, and presence of Fox's college teammate and close friend Bam Adebayo. The Heat can't come close to topping a Spurs offer, though. Ultimately, the Kings are going to have to work hard to build the market for Fox, given that he and his representation at Clutch Sports seem to have made their plans clear. However, they should still be able to get a proverbial King's ransom for their long-term point guard, pun intended. Player to watch, John Collins. After a couple of years in the wilderness, Collins is back to being a very productive NBA player. From 2018 to 21, Collins averaged 19.3 points and 9 rebounds while shooting 56.5% from the field and 38.4% from 3 while taking 3 attempts per game. That's what got him a 5-year, $125 million deal. However, after the Hawks got Clint Capela during the 2020-21 season and began using him more in ball screens with Trae Young, Collins' numbers began to drop. Then he was traded to Utah, where he took a season to adjust. Over the 2021-24 seasons, Collins averaged just 14.7 points and 7.6 rebounds. So far this year, he's back to 17.9 points and 8.3 rebounds, while playing 30 minutes per game and has been quite effective as a rim runner and on the offensive glass. The issue for Collins, though, is what it always is. You need the perfect center next to him to get the best out of him. He's not good enough as a rim protector to play the 5, even though his best role offensively is as a 5. He needs to be a 5 on offense and a 4 on defense, which means your center has to be able to shoot it to maintain adequate spacing in the playoffs. Otherwise, you're best utilizing him as a third big. He showed positive defensive moments in Atlanta, but I wouldn't say those have been particularly evident in Utah. Collins' salary would be quite large if a team wanted him as a third big at $26.6 million. Because of that, his market likely will be limited. Next year might be an easier sell on the trade market when he'll likely be on an expiring $26.6 million salary, assuming he picks up his player option. Another thing worth noting with all of the Jazz players here: if Collins, Colin Sexton, and Jordan Clarkson are kept around, the Jazz would have nearly $60 million in expiring deals for next season if they want to try to acquire a star. Steph Curry on trade deadline: it's not for me to make those decisions. San Francisco. Steph Curry seemed intent on avoiding any headlines Friday after some of his more recent trade and personnel-related comments sparked national conversation. He deflected a question about whether he put pressure on the front office prior to the deadline. "You will never know about that," Curry said. "We have conversations all the time. I want to win. It's not my job. I'm not a coach. I'm not a GM. I'm not an owner. It's pretty clear where I stand, trying to make the necessary adjustments to try to win." The Warriors enter the weekend in the mix on a number of names. They've had conversations with the Miami Heat and Chicago Bulls about Jimmy Butler and Zach LaVine. Their 2025 protected first-rounder has been floated around the league to see what it could fetch. In the last couple weeks, there has been a growing level of urgency to shake it up to at least some degree. That generally leads to a level of tension and angst in a locker room with plenty of respected veterans like Andrew Wiggins, Kevin Looney, and Gary Payton, who prefer to stay with the Warriors. "You're another year away from the 22 title, so it's a little less of a, I think every trade deadline in a sense has been a little uneasy," Curry said. "But the further you get away from winning, it becomes more of a sense of urgency. It's the NBA. It's nothing different than guys have experienced before. You have to be able to play through it, keep confidence, understand there's only so many things you can control, just play basketball." Player to watch: Clint Capela. Capela has done a lot of the dirty work for a scrappy, fun Hawks team this year, averaging 9.4 points and 9 rebounds. He's a killer on the offensive glass and generally does a solid job in drop coverage defensively even if he's not as mobile as he was in his mid-20s. But in his 11th year in the NBA, Capela continues to be a starting quality center. Still, the Hawks are thought by other teams to be very open to discussing their highly paid veterans. Capela makes $22.3 million this season, and that's a large amount of money for another team to pay to acquire him given his production. Teams out there could certainly use real center depth and would love a backup big man, but this is a difficult price point to meet because matching that salary would often mean moving at least one real rotation player from your team. It's certainly not impossible that Capela could be moved, but it seems like a deal would be difficult if the Hawks want anything positive in return, and they should, given that Capela is useful to their defensive infrastructure. Another WNBA blockbuster: Setu Sabally to Phoenix Mercury. The last significant domino of the 2025 WNBA offseason has fallen. The Phoenix Mercury are acquiring two-time WNBA All-Star Setu Sabally from the Dallas Wings in a 3-team deal that also involves the Indiana Fever, according to ESPN. The agreement will send Sabally, center Kalani Brown, and guard Sev Uzun to the Mercury. The Wings are receiving guard Tiasha Harris, who Phoenix acquired earlier this week in a trade with the Connecticut Sun, and the rights to forward Micaiah Herbert Harrigan from the Mercury, as well as forward Nalissa Smith and the No. 8 pick in the 2025 draft from the Indiana Fever. Indiana is receiving forward Sophie Cunningham and the No. 19 pick from the Mercury. Player to watch: Zach LaVine. I don't think there is a more underappreciated player in the NBA than LaVine. After a lost 2023-24 season shortened by injury, the 6'5" guard is back to being a terrific, efficient scorer and playmaker. LaVine is averaging 24.0 points, 4.8 rebounds, and 4.5 assists. He's shooting 51.4% from the field, 45% from 3, and 81.6% from the line, while carrying an under-talented Chicago Bulls team to the play-in race. It's gotten even more ridiculous over his last 13 games as he's averaged 28.7 points while shooting 53.8% from the field, 48.2% from 3, and 81.3% from the line. There's a real case he's been one of the top scoring guards in the league this season. He can play both on and off the ball, but is best as an off-ball scorer because his decision-making isn't always the best. He's successful off the ball because he's an elite catch-and-shoot player. However, on the ball, LaVine is also a legitimate three-level scorer, and that matters in the playoffs when defenses tighten up and things get tougher. Defensively, LaVine has been pretty good this year on the ball despite Chicago's overall defense being atrocious. You two have to protect him and be aware of him off the ball as he can get lost. But he hasn't been a severely negative defender for a couple of years now. And yet, just because he's been an unstoppable offensive force this season, it doesn't make him the most valuable trade asset listed here. The issue for LaVine is financial. The two-time All-Star makes $43 million this year and has 2 additional years for a total of $95 million. Even with his play so far, he's still probably overpaid, but it's not by a significant margin. Additionally, in-season salary matching can be quite difficult for players who make this much money, especially when the Bulls would likely want at least some version of expiring salary. If LaVine is moved, Bulls fans shouldn't expect a Kings ransom despite him proving again this season that he still has an awful lot of game. Brandon Ingram, who has not played for nearly 8 weeks due to a high ankle sprain, was spotted getting shots up before Friday's game against the Boston Celtics. With the Pelicans on the road next week ahead of the trade deadline was that Ingram's last time warming up in the Smoothie King Center as a Pelican. Steve Kerr, Warriors aren't good enough to stand pat. San Francisco, prior to Friday's 130-105 loss to the Phoenix Suns, Steve Kerr was asked about the Golden State Warriors' approach to next Thursday's trade deadline. It is the front office's final chance to significantly alter a roster that has continually proved over the last couple months that it isn't good enough to be a realistic contender in a crowded conference. We're not in a position where we can just say, "Nah, we're good. Let's stand pat," Kerr said. That's the reality of where we are. General Manager Mike Dunleavy's doing his due diligence, doing his job. If there's something that makes sense, he's going to do it. If not, I'm very comfortable going forward with this team. Steph Curry was relayed Kerr's assessment post-game and asked to give his. It's not for me to make those decisions, Curry said. I want to win, so whatever it means to do that. Player to watch, Anfernee Simons. Simons is one of the more difficult evaluations in the league. He has shown the ability to be an extremely explosive scorer, averaging 18.2 points per game. However, this season hasn't been as clean, as he's dealt with a couple of minor injuries, including an illness and a right-hand sprain. After starting the season in his first 25 games with a true shooting percentage that was 10 points below league average, he's now up around league average again. He also has real defensive deficiencies that cloud his game. On a good team, Simons might be more of a great sixth man as opposed to a definite starter. It's possible he could find the right team and role that allows him to be a starter, especially during his massive hot streaks. But that consistency has been a bit too up and down throughout his career so far. Simons is still just 25 and a good player. The problem for Portland, though, is that he only has a year and a half left on the rookie extension that he signed back in 2021. The organization has also made several investments into on-ball backcourt players, including Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe. This might be the time to try to cash in on Simons, but he makes $25.9 million this season, followed by $27.7 million next season. Those are hefty numbers. Simons' trade value will likely be determined by how he plays over the next couple of weeks. Should the Blazers try to cash in now? Should they try to extend the summer? They have a lot of questions on a messy roster moving forward. Player to watch, Bobby Portis. Portis has been a long-time bench stalwart for the Bucks, with his ability to space the floor-producing value next to Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's finished third in Sixth Man of the Year, voting in each of the last 2 seasons, and helped the Bucks to a championship back in 2021. He's averaging 13.3 points and 7.9 rebounds this year in just 24 minutes per night, right in line with his track record. But Portis' defense has long been a concern, and this year it's been a bit worse. He can be somewhat distracted off the ball and lose track of his assignment. His rim protection has never been particularly impactful even in his best seasons. On the perimeter, he's not all that adept when caught on an island against guards. Still, Portis' offense is a real value add, and it's hard to find centers who can step away and shoot. Over his career in Milwaukee, he's hit 39.8% of his three-pointers on more than 1,100 career attempts. He also can be counted on to consistently bring physicality and play with effort. In the right situation, he can be valuable for a team that needs some shooting and rebounding from the center position. If the Bucks end up getting involved in a deal for an upgrade, his contract makes the most sense to be involved. Player to watch, Anfernee Simons. After starting the season in his first 25 games with a true shooting percentage that was 10 points below league average, he's now up around league average again. He also has real defensive deficiencies that cloud his game. On a good team, Simons might be more of a great sixth man as opposed to a definite starter. It's possible he could find the right team and role that allows him to be a starter, especially during his massive hot streaks. But that consistency has been a bit too up and down throughout his career so far. Simons is still just 25 and a good player. The problem for Portland, though, is that he only has a year and a half left on the rookie extension that he signed back in 2021. The organization has also made several investments into on-ball backcourt players, including Scoot Henderson and Shaedon Sharpe. This might be the time to try to cash in on Simons, but he makes $25.9 million this season, followed by $27.7 million next season. Those are hefty numbers. Simons' trade value will likely be determined by how he plays over the next couple of weeks. Should the Blazers try to cash in now? Should they try to extend this summer? They have a lot of questions on a messy roster moving forward. Player to watch, Kevin Huerter. Huerter hasn't found his rhythm this year in Sacramento, and that's unfortunately been true for the past 2 years. Typically a real shooter, he made 38.2% of his threes over his 6-year career coming into this season. Huerter has only hit 30.3% from three. He also hasn't brought value on defense. When Huerter isn't shooting at a high level, it can be hard to have him on the court, even though teams continue to guard him as a guy they have to stay attached to. More than that, though, the Kings have a lot of depth at the guard and wing positions. In the backcourt, they have De'Aaron Fox and Malik Monk. On the wing, Keegan Murray, DeMar DeRozan, and Keon Ellis have outplayed Huerter so far. Rookie Devin Carter also has entered the fold. Huerter makes $16.8 million before getting $18 million next year. Those are high numbers, but not all that bad if he can get back to the level he was at in his final year in Atlanta and his first year in Sacramento. It feels like Sacramento would look to move him in a basketball trade as opposed to just looking to dump his contract. Can the Kings combine a draft pick with Huerter to get a player who can shoot and defend in the front court? Player to watch, Jonas Valanciunas. Valanciunas signed a 3-year, $30 million contract this offseason with the final year non-guaranteed. It's a good deal for a player who is probably one of the best backup centers in the NBA. So far for Washington, he's been the perfect big man to provide an interior presence for skinny, developmental big man Alex Sarr. And the deal immediately became a useful trade chip because teams are always looking for size at the deadline, even in a backup role. On this contract, it's completely reasonable for Valanciunas to be a backup on an excellent team. This year, Valanciunas is averaging 11.6 points and 8.2 rebounds in just 19.7 minutes per game. He's physical on the interior and crushes the glass on both ends. He's an offensive force with how physical he is and will occasionally step out and take one of those slingshot threes, even though those have been fewer and further between this year. You probably will struggle to play him in the playoffs because of his lack of foot speed. But at a reasonable price for a backup big man, you probably don't have to focus much on what he's bringing in the playoffs. Any team that needs more depth on the interior could look to add Valanciunas and receive help. I can't imagine the price point being more than a couple of second-rounders. If I were the Sixers, I would be calling the Wizards every day. No team needs an elite backup more than the Sixers, and Valanciunas would be perfect for the role. Other teams like Indiana, Denver, and the Lakers could use another big too. Normally, if payroll is a mere minimum salary above the luxury tax line, an organization gets under it by the trade deadline, its final chance to do so. 3 teams fit that description as of now. The New Orleans Pelicans, $1.4 million above it, are sure to get under. The Pels historically don't pay the tax, and they won't choose to now when they are at the bottom of the Western Conference. Ducking it won't be difficult. Forget about gaudy trades involving Brandon Ingram or C.J. McCollum. All they have to do is dump a minimum player at the end of their roster, and they're below it. The LA Clippers, $2.5 million above the tax line, that are fighting for a top 6 seed, are another team to watch, even if Steve Ballmer spends like few others. They could foist a couple of tiny salaries onto another team, include a second-round pick or two as a thank you, and delay the repeater tax for at least 1 year, which would be ideal long-term. The Cleveland Cavaliers are in the NBA's most